A lot of people put a lot of work into making sure we keep on eating.
These companies rely on deep science to understand how we're attracted to food and how they can make their foods attractive to us.
What's up, you guys? Today is a super interesting conversation because I'm bringing on an actual food scientist.
This is Bruno Xavier.
Most of this product is basically sugar and fat.
He's a food scientist at the Cornell Food Venture Center.
Oh my God!
And what is a food scientist? Well, you know, when you walk in a gas station or a grocery store and you see all the candy and the cookies and the chips, there are literal teams whose job it is to create and design that food, making sure that it has the perfect texture, the sweetness, the saltiness to make it so that people like you and me can't stop eating it. It's just that good.
One goal, food that is simply irresistible.
My friend Bruno Xavier is part of the team who makes sure that that food is safe before it gets to the market.
Color additives with names like Yellow 6 or Red 40 are typically derived from petroleum or coal sources, and the FDA approves batches of these ingredients before use.
Our concerns around artificial ingredients are related to the fact that we don't know the effects of an artificial chemical compound in our bodies until we study it.
Now, we talk about so many different things, whether that's what are preservatives and how they work. How do you actually make an Oreo? What does it consist of? Or a Skittle? What is the bliss point? And how is that designed so that the food is that good? This is somebody within the food industry that we're bringing on. But of course, I love to bring around the information that's truthful so we can have all different perspectives and takes on this so that we can ultimately unravel the truth and understand our realities, to understand there is so much more out there. It's called the bliss point, the proper salt and sweet and crunch factor that makes people, like you said, not want to stop eating it. How do you create the flavor, the bliss point that would make the product, kind of for lack of a better word, addictive? How does that group of people qualify? Ding, ding, ding. This is a success. Is there a certain, are they measuring brain waves? Are they measuring, something? Because really the measure is how much people want to keep eating the thing. I would think.
Yeah.
How addictive is the thing is probably what they're measuring it off of. Am I right?
Well, it's just about the sensory study, right? So we're doing a sensory study. So you're going to present the samples to 300 people or whatever number it is. And the samples will be paired, or you might have 3 of them at the same time. And then you ask the people, for example, to rank them. Which one do you prefer? And then you might ask some questions about why, or what about which aspect of this food you like the most? Why do you don't like this one, and so on. So, and then you process that information. So what we're not actually measuring brain waves is our interpretation of our sensation when you eat the product. However, some companies might instead use trained panels. In which you take a smaller group of people, say 12, 15, 20 people, and you train them. So I want you, Lauren, to try this cookie and tell me which one is more crunchy, or which one has the more attractive color, or how long does the crunching sensation stays in your mouth, like 3 seconds, or they might come back to you and ask that question 10 minutes later. Hey, how do you feel about that product that you ate? Do you feel good about it? Would you eat more of it right now? So there's a lot of psychology that goes into these questions, right?
Mm-hmm. Do you know much about what they do to create that type of reaction, I suppose, in people?
Yeah, well, actually, one of my colleagues is a specialist in that, and I'm always fascinated about the kind of stuff they do. But a lot of it is simply by measuring people's reactions. And that's where it becomes really cool, right? You use these very well-established techniques to get people to evaluate the product. And then you measure that and create mathematical models to see where that ideal concentration of each one of those ingredients will be. It all depends on the amount of time and money that you have to invest in developing a product. But whenever you get to that level, you create products such as Cheetos and Oreos. I'm fascinated by Oreos, right? That product is so delicious, right? It's a perfect balance of crunchiness and sweetness, and then you have it all.
Yeah.
Right?
The middle
Do not
part is the
yeah,
best.
I cannot
Yeah.
be trusted with a bag of Oreos.
Neither. So let's just say like the way a food would be created and like studied to see how the perfect bliss point would exist is like company comes up with this product goes to like food scientists basically to create enough like a panel of people who test out the food flavors.
Mm-hmm.
And then is it tested amongst like all different groups of people? And then those people basically rank their favorite. I would say maybe like 1 to 10. And then you kind of hone in on that. And is that right?
And then you keep, is an
Iterating.
iterative, a process, right? Then, okay, so they like this spice level here better. So what about I increase that even more? Is that a maximum limit, right? And there are some, statistical methods that guide you through this process development a little bit. But in the end, again, it's just the amount of time and money that you have available to invest in a product. It's a gigantic puzzle. If you're locked into a laboratory with access to a sensory panel, you can come out and say, wow, I made the perfect ice cream flavor, for example. People just cannot stop eating it, right? Look at the people there. They're still in the lab. They're still eating because they got attacked and they ate all the samples. Great. But then you realize that you are using an ingredient that is too expensive. It's very difficult to get a steady supply of, that will not last well. It will change color during the shelf life. So there are many factors that need to be considered to develop a product that is really a winner in the grocery store for a very long time, because things can change. And again, Oreo story, right? Originally, they used animal fat to make the filling, but then it became too expensive at the same time that food scientists discovered a way to transform vegetable oils into basically margarine, right? So the fact is they had to change the recipe for the cookie 3 times without changing the consumer experience. I think it's a fascinating story. That team had a very unique type of opportunity in the history of food science, because there you are, responsible for a phenomenally valuable brand and product. It will have to change because it's becoming too expensive, or we are now concerned about trans fats, right? Which was a motivating factor there too. But if you make the wrong change, you can ruin the brand, right? So imagine the level of responsibility that those guys had, and they managed to do it these times. But the goal was how to change the recipe without changing the product. But it's a gigantic puzzle. That's all that I'm saying. It's not simply by finding the ingredients and making sure that the balance is something that tastes good. It has to sell. It has to be scalable. You have to be able to find the ingredients. Has to be stable without changing color, changing taste, and so on. It's a big deal. That's why it's so difficult. And there are some shortcuts, such as the ones that we discussed here, preservatives and antioxidants and so on and so forth.
Do you know how like a Cheeto is made? Because I'm pretty sure I read that there were like 27 scientists that worked on a Cheeto as far as food scientists. Is that right?
Yeah. Okay, so the base, how do you make that puffy structure, right? Is a process called extrusion. It's very similar to how popcorn is made, right? But what's the advantage over popcorn? Well, now you can add all kinds of spices to the dough, right? And that's the trick to it. So you add colors, you add spices, you add some oil, you add lots of salt, right? And you try to achieve that magic combination that will make people not bother their fingers getting orange and making a mess in front of TV because the stuff tastes so good and you can't stop eating it. That's where the science, and if you're assuming so much science went into developing that, I'm sure it was in the balance of that, of those ingredients, spices, salt, and probably some sugar as well, to balance it all out.
So as far as, like you were talking to me about this a little bit before. I thought this was interesting. You said you will never ever eat hot dogs, and that's one you're going to stay away from. What's up with that? Where I want to understand with specifically hot dogs, what is the nitrate issue? What is that Why is that a problem?
Quick one here, you guys. So I know how challenging it can be sometimes to find a local farmer. And that's why I want to share with you my farmer. This guy has the whole thing down 100%. I have never had better tasting meat in my life. I'm not just saying that. You know, I don't tell you about things that I don't actually use myself. It's called Suretail Creek Farm. This is a pound of ground beef, and I have one of these, at least one a day, as well as their eggs. And I love everything else that they have on there. They have so much variety. They have organ meats, they have pork, they have chicken, everything that you would need. But if you are in need of a local farmer and you want somebody that's raising animals regeneratively and you want something that tastes good and there's no hormones added, I highly recommend these guys because this is literally how I live my life. Everything I eat comes from these guys, not even kidding. They will ship anywhere in the country. If you use the link below, they'll actually provide a discount automatically. And if you are looking to actually save a lot of money in costs, because I know meat can be expensive, then I recommend buying it in bulk. Get a half cow, get a full cow, split it with some neighbors or some friends or some family, and then you can get the meat hyper discounted, along with all the rest of the stuff that you can get on there too. So anyways, you guys, link is below, and let's get back to the show.
Yeah, like many other issues when it comes to foods, we don't have enough data to support conclusively this discussion, but there are significant concerns about it. We add these salts to meat, nitrates and nitrites, usually sodium nitrate or sodium nitrite to meat, because they inhibit very dangerous microorganisms. You probably heard of Clostridium botulinum, which produces a toxin called botulin. It's the same toxin that we use for Botox, but it's extremely lethal, right? When Clostridium botulinum grows in a food product, it might kill you. It's very lethal, very dangerous, and food manufacturers are very concerned, very preoccupied about that. So nitrates are very effective at inhibiting Clostridium botulinum, which is a concern in hot dogs, many other products, even vacuum-packed cheeses and deli meats. It's the same concern. It's not specific to hot dogs. And the problem is nitrites react with amino acids in the protein of the hot dogs, and they create nitrosamines. And these are carcinogenic. We know that.
Cancer causing. Okay.
They cause cancer, exactly. If I can avoid eating them altogether, I will, right? I will not take my chance and eat, 50 micrograms per day is okay. So if I'm only eating 10, I think I'm fine. Then I'm going to eat half a hot dog every day, 180 per year. Not going to happen, right?
Let's just avoid it.
I would just avoid it. I do make an exception once a year. Usually I have hot dogs.
They're pretty good.
Because they are delicious, right? Yeah, the fact is you do not choose the prime cuts from the pig to make hot dogs. It's exactly the opposite, right? That's where all the stuff that cannot be used for anything else goes. Anything that looks too bad, it does not have a good profile in terms of protein to fat balance or anything like that, or it has too much salt. That's the final destination for those products, right? One step before animal feed, and sometimes even that's not the case. You might actually use better ingredients to make animal feeds because we have good standards for those diets for animals. You cannot feed them only hot dogs every day. They will not last long.
Okay. So the hot dog is basically the waste of the product completely. Like, I hate to say that word, but it's kind of like all of the parts that you can't use of a pig that's put into that product mixed with salt and fat, basically, and some sugar. Yeah.
And again, it's important to notice that. I don't want to say that, just because it's a leftover part of the pig, it means that it's bad. That's not the case, For example, in Brazil, we make feijoada, right? That's the tail of the pig, that's the snout, and the stuff is delicious. But again, you will not only eat that, you will not eat high amounts of that routinely. And you will not mix it with the amount of salt that has to be added in nitrite to make it stable and safe, and the list goes on and on and on. That's why I avoid that product. It's a personal decision, right? But as a scientist, when you're asked, and you have to provide an answer to that. Well, there are many sides to that story. Now, this is the situation. You are a regulatory agency. You are in charge of the food supply for 400 million people in this country. And then you're going to say that nitrites should be banned? What about the people that eat hot dogs? They like it, or they have that as a major part of their diet. If you ban nitrites, then you have the risk of Clostridium botulinum in the product. What decision do you make? What is the least of the two evils, right? Is that necessary? So that's the type of decision that we have to make. And of course, that's not considering the political side of things, right? Are you going to stay in office if you sign that law?
Well, right.
That effectively bans hot dogs. So it's very complicated, and we're always trying to do the best thing. But as a scientist, I think the most important thing is that we need to look for information in an honest way, right? And not only look for the information that we are biased towards, right? Well, I like meat. I grew up, eating meat routinely. So every research that says that meat is good for you, I tend to accept that more easily than the opposite, right? So that's not a scientific honesty. We have to challenge that in ourselves and accept that these answers are not simple.
Yeah, and it's funny because I eat mostly meat. I eat basically all meat, and so it's a carnivore lifestyle. So I'm with you on the meat thing. Where I think the difference is that when nitrates are added, that's where it's like adding something to the meat that's not meat. And so, I would argue in those situations, and this is just my opinion, that I think the evil part, if we were to have to pick an evil, is to put something that's potentially carcinogenic in a product that should be consumed by people. You know what I mean? Like if it's a waste of an animal, waste, air quotes, like it's not the desirable part, let's say, for most people. It's still consumable. It's still feeding people. We shouldn't need to put in a carcinogenic, potentially, product in there. There's so many questions about preservatives too. I'd be super curious to hear your thoughts on preservatives. For example, like yellow 5 and yellow 6, they're like flavoring agents basically that I'm pretty sure they were banned in Finland and Norway, a couple other places in Europe, I want to say. Am I getting that right? Those two preservatives?
Well, they're not preservatives, right? They're colors.
They're colors. Okay.
Yeah, and I wouldn't be able to tell to say exactly where they are banned, but I had a friend. I had a friend in my previous job, and he used to say that we keep being concerned about preservatives, but coloring agents are the worst. And that's one of the things. You don't need the coloring food, right? That's doing absolutely nothing in terms of flavor, taste, and nutrition value.
It's literally just to color it?
Yeah, it does nothing else. Now, our brains are wired that way, right? I remember we made 2 samples of yogurt. Both had the same amount of strawberry flavoring in it. One had color and one did not. And almost 100% of the people that we had taste testing the product said that the one that was more red tasted more like strawberry, right?
That's interesting.
The color doesn't add anything. So that's the type of thing that our brain assumes. But when we push that, when we add color to a product in order to sell more, again, unfortunately, that's marketing. It's purely marketing. It's just like the packaging, right? It doesn't add anything to the product. But in this case, we are using products that have a very controversial, or I would say more, that have strong indications of being detrimental to our health. And we add that to the product, even though it's not necessary, except for a marketing purpose.
Yeah. Really, and that's a lot of what I talk about too, is like so much of the food that we're given or the things that we're given to consume is given to us by other people, right? Who want to sell their product. I mean, we're just humans, and it's capitalism, and people have every right to want to do that. But yeah, I think the part that gets a little bit tricky is where it's like, how did this cross the line of being approved? Because, and that's not obviously your job, right? It sounds like that's before you, but it's like we have, I'm reading here right now that yellow 5 and yellow 6 contains benzidine, which is a human animal carcinogen permitted in low, presumably safe levels in dyes. But according to the FDA, the ingestion of this can cause cancer. But so that's illegal in Europe now, I believe, but it's not illegal in the States, which is kind of interesting that that's a thing that's still existing here. I don't know why that is.
I think it's interesting that we focus on this question, like, why are these things allowed in foods, right? It wasn't long ago that cigarettes were advertised to children.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Right? And it was on TV, and it was marketing campaigns to get women to smoke more. I mean, who came up with the idea of allowing that?
Other people.
I think it's just simply politics and money.
Totally. Politics and money. Yeah. And I mean,
expected that would not be a factor in food would be, very naive.
I agree. Yeah. It's a consumable, right? It's the most common thing. We eat it. We need it like every single day, food. So what's a better product to market in a colorful, beautiful way? Yeah. It's interesting how the psychology of consumption goes into the food side of things. So as far as preservatives, so you said this isn't a preservative. It's more of a coloring. Like what? So you're making sure food is safe, and you're also helping to create a longer shelf life. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. So in creating a longer shelf life, and I know you do a lot more than that, but in creating a longer shelf life, you probably have to use preservatives, right?
Sometimes you don't. One good example here, mustard. Right? The mustard, that we squeeze into the hot dog. That product doesn't need any preservatives. It's just a mixture of mustard seeds, vinegar, and salt. Bam, you have mustard. You don't even need to cook it to make it stable and safe. Mustard has antimicrobial compounds, so natural preservatives. And basically, it stays that way unless it dries out in your fridge or on the table. It's not going to mold because it's so antimicrobial, and it's natural. It's good for you, I suppose. I don't know. There's no concerns about the safety of mustard. So let me just talk a little bit about what preservatives are, right? Preservatives are compounds, so they're not food ingredients. We are talking about compounds, extracts, or synthesized compounds that inhibit microorganisms and then extend the shelf life of the product, often called chemical preservatives. These are chemically synthesized compounds that are very effective at very low concentrations inhibiting microorganisms growing in food. These are allowed in foods up to a very small concentration of 100 or maybe 1,000 ppm. I don't remember, it's 0.1%. They're widely used in a variety of products. But if you add it to ketchup, it will prevent the ketchup from developing molds if you leave it at room temperature after opening. So some manufacturers might choose to add that so that people can have the product at room temperature for a longer amount of time. But they don't have to in order to sell the product, to keep the product stable. I don't eat products that contain those. I don't. It's unnecessary for me to consume products that contain chemically preserved foods. However, chemically preserved foods are much cheaper. They're extremely convenient. If you are a parent that is juggling, 3 jobs and you have to send food to your kid, I think it's a sin for you to make them feel bad about what they are saying to the kids, because that's what they can do. But instructing them on the choices that they are making without making anyone feel guilty, okay, that's decent, because maybe they don't know the options. But you go there and cook for them, right?
Yeah, right.
Between midnight and 2 a.m., I suppose.
Right, like it's always easy to say you should do something different, but we're not in that person's life. It's much different.
Exactly. but it's important that we are telling people, okay, when you have a chance to cook a fresh meal, never think that a fast food is fancier, is better, it's classier, whatever. No, it's not. There is a misconception there. This is not good food. Look at what you're eating. Look at the choices that you're making. It's for convenience. It's not for nutrition. It's definitely not something that is good for your children to be consuming every day. Preserving food, you have many ways to make that happen. The longer the food lasts, usually the cheaper it becomes, because then you can transport it for longer distances, so you can have centralized production. There are many advantages that lead to reduction in cost. Adding preservatives is one of them. In my life today, I don't eat those foods containing preservatives anymore.
So do you not do it because you are aware of the negative side effects of the preservatives?
I wouldn't use the word aware. I'm concerned. I'm concerned as a consumer about the potential side effects. We know that they are potential carcinogens. So I will not take the chance. I will not choose to take the chance. But I will not say that you shouldn't. But, if you're concerned about that, I would encourage you to read about it. I can help you read about it. Anyone that wants to study, I'm always up for learning more.
Was there one thing that stood out to you that was like, okay, that's the why?
There was one, now that you ask. I was visiting actually a good friend's dairy facility way back, when, and his company, they make several products, including dulce de leche, right? And that's a product that is very difficult to make without preservatives, because the amount of water in the product is high enough for molds to grow. So if you have any air in the package, you might open the can of dulce de leche and it will be moldy. So the reality is that a lot of manufacturers use potassium sorbate in those products to prevent that problem.
And that's a preservative, potassium sorbate?
Potassium sorbate, yes. And then I asked him, do you use potassium sorbate? And he said, absolutely not. And he said, with, very emotionally so, he had teary eyes when he told me, my sister died of cancer. Since then, I will not touch any preservative in my food manufacturing, in my house, anywhere. So I did not make my decision at that point, but I definitely started paying attention to that, because he was a person that understood a lot about food. He's studying in France, so they have a different perspective on food manufacturing there, and he had that very strong opinion about it. But my opinion about preservatives, chemical preservatives at that point, became to form and got to this situation. I will just not take the chance because I can avoid that, right? And it might be one or two products that I might still eat once in a while that contain preservatives. I am not an extremist about that either, but I definitely make a strong effort to avoid them.
Totally. Yeah, same. If we're talking about nutrition, as a food scientist, do food scientists get education on food nutrition? Is that something that goes together? Or if not, do you know why not, I guess?
Yeah, sadly, no. So I was trained as a food engineer in Brazil, right? I had one course in food nutrition. I don't even remember how it was called, right? So it was 1 3-credit course. It's very little. We are a bit, I think, too focused on the area, on the major, and often students will graduate without much training in nutrition at all.
Yeah, that's like confusing to me too, Bruno, because I'm like, how does it work to identify if something is safe if there's no understanding of the nutritive value or lack thereof, right? And that's the part that confuses me, where we're grading something if we don't know how to grade it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but that's the thing, we are not grading. It's just like imagine that you are, I don't know, I'm trying to come up with an analogy here, but you are judging a Olympic sport, right? But you are in charge of just saying how far the athletes are jumping during a basketball game, and then you're saying, "Oh, you're jumping high enough." So from my perspective, you can be an Olympic athlete for our country, right, to represent our country. But that's just one aspect, right? How well do you play with others? Can you throw the ball into the so there are many aspects of the food that need to be evaluated for you to have a complete overview of the product. My job is focused on food safety, and food safety is about the physical, chemical, and biological hazards. Even so, we are very focused on the biological hazards. Can this food be contaminated with salmonella, with listeria? But the FDA provides guidance on what can be considered a food. So as long as the food is made using only ingredients that are generally recognized as safe by the FDA, it is sufficient to allow those products to be on the market, to be on the shelves.
Okay, so like if I were a person who wanted to create a product that was food, let's just do a huge one. Let's say I'm Skittles, right? I initially I create this product, I have an idea, and then I go to you to create it at scale. And then you tell me how safe it is, how not it is, how to create that at scale. And then once that's done, then that goes to the FDA to approve it.
Yes, exactly. But Skittles specifically wouldn't need to go through that process with the FDA just because of the characteristics of the food. From the microbial perspective or the safety perspective, it's a low hazard type of food, so it doesn't go through the FDA. But the same process is true. You have to identify what are the hazards, control them, and put the practices in place to make sure that the food is safe.
Okay. So it's a low hazard type of food.
Yeah.
So
from the food safety perspective.
From the food safety perspective. What other perspective wouldn't think it would be? Like, is there another perspective that would argue that? Because I remember I saw you in the Wall Street Journal thing, and the title of it was that it was a little bit, the ingredients were a little bit controversial.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. If you eat too much sugar, right, you're gonna get sick. We know that. So that's and often some manufacturers come to us and they ask us about nutritional aspects of the food, which we do not provide guidance on. But just because I'm saying that food is stable and safe does not mean that you can eat a pound of it every day. That's what I'm saying.
Right. Okay. Yeah. But like, it's just like water, right? Like you should have water, but you can't have 55 gallons of water a day. It's going to be a problem.
You should inhale it.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So if we're talking about, that's it. I mean, it's so interesting because there's so many different stages and levels to this. And I'm so interested in this process because there's so much that goes into food. And I like, you walk into a grocery store, you walk into a convenience store, and you almost take it for granted how much detail is in every single item in there, right?
It's so much that we take for granted in that decision, right? When we purchase a product, we never consider if that is safe or not. You are kind of just like when you are home and there's food in the cupboard, right? It's edible, I'm sure. Somebody else is looking after what I'm eating, what I'm not. And yeah, sometimes we can make bad decisions just because we are assuming the wrong things, and especially when it comes to following whatever marketing is telling us. Like, you can eat this product and still look like this person in the ad. For example, that's very misleading, and it's not true, right? You never see the real people that drink lots of beer, right? They're not the ones that are in the commercial.
Yeah,
right?
they're not the ones with the 6-pack abs.
Yeah, exactly. But they're the ones that are trying to convince you to eat. But anyway, for example, coffee. Coffee is very safe, right? We've been drinking coffee for many years. Nobody is going to drink coffee today and have a completely unexpected adverse reaction a few minutes later. Then someone takes caffeine from coffee and makes it tenfold concentrated extract from that and adds that to, I don't know, let's say something that you can eat a lot of, ice cream. Well, then you have 2 scoops of ice cream and you're close to a heart attack. I don't know. That's the type of situation that can happen, even if you start with a type of food that is being consumed forever. And we know it has a history of being safe, but now we have a new use for the food, and it might not be the case. Well, the FDA has to catch up with all those things. I'm sure that their job is not easy. And then the FDA will make assumptions. Of course, we've been consuming potatoes for hundreds of years, so potatoes are safe. We've been consuming salt. We have soybean oil that we are using. So let's put those 3 together into a product. Let's make potato chips. Well, you eat 1 serving, and that's one thing. Well, even the salt, it's not bad. It's good. We need the sodium in order for muscle contraction. It's an important element. We need sodium. But then you eat 100 times more sodium than you need. Well, it has other effects, right? Everything in the balance can be positive, and out of that balance, it can be extremely detrimental to your health.
Got it. Okay. So yeah, it's the uses of it. So yeah, so that can't be controlled.
You can have 6 good ingredients and make bad food. But at the same time, the regulatory agencies cannot predict all possible uses of the food. There are many good products that are shelved, even though they would be very good products, but a company might decide not to bring them to market just because, for example, it would cannibalize another product that they have on the shelves, right? For example, imagine that Nabisco, right? The ones that make Oreos, if I'm not mistaken. Somebody comes up with a cookie that, wow, is phenomenal. It has these characteristics here, and people actually prefer these products. For these people, it's better than Oreos. Well, but the profit margin on that product ends up being just 5% smaller than Oreos, and people choose that product over Oreos. Nabisco will choose not to release the product because they want to sell the product with the highest profit margin. Every company would make that decision. Not only there is a food processing, food engineering aspect of the product development, there is also the financial side and the commercial side that needs to be taken into account. Eating is so simple, but if you want to make an informed decision, oh man, you would have to do a tremendous amount of research.
Curious if you have a take on seed oils. I know when you were talking to me before about making Skittles and how Skittles are made, I believe seed oils like vegetable oils, palm oil goes into creating the texture that's needed for the Skittles. Is that right?
Yeah, palm oil, right? That's what they use the most. I read into this quite a bit, and I basically gave up. I personally believe that the information is not true. It would be too much of a coincidence to believe that at the same time when animal fats were becoming scarce and expensive for the applications that we had, then a technology comes up, and the technology allows you to convert very cheap vegetable oils into fats, right? They're solid at room temperature, and then you can use them for baking and such other applications. And then all of a sudden we find out, oh, you know what? Animal fats are bad for you.
Right.
And in fact, the whole story about cholesterol is controversial, right? We know.
Oh, you know about that?
Well, I know some things about it, which I tried to read a little. But to me, like, it's tempting to accept this idea that, saying that cholesterol is the culprit for cardiovascular disease is just like blaming the firemen for having caused the fire in the apartment building, because they are always there when the stuff is catching on fire, right? So it's not accurate. It's not sufficient to say that we are eating more cholesterol, but there is a relationship, right? But it's not just the cholesterol, right? We change so many things at the same time. We are eating more salt. We're exercising less. we are eating less fiber. I think that's an extremely important part of our diet that we do not pay enough attention to, is the amount of fiber that we eat. That's certainly something that I pay very close attention to, more than the amount of carbs or amount of protein that I eat. I make sure that I eat enough fiber. I do think that story is not completely honest. What we were told to switch away from animal fats and towards vegetable oils, it's not completely true. So much so that people continued or actually have more heart disease after the switch was made, right? And it's been 50 years of data now showing exactly that same story.
You know, Bruno, we should at some point really talk about the carnivore or the animal-based, meat-based lifestyle. And the reason for that is not because I think everybody needs to do that to find health. I agree. I think you can find it via plant-based, vegan, whatever. But to your point about profit and the interesting timing with the cholesterol, that's a lot of what this lifestyle is about, is unearthing that information where, you know, there are people, thousands, millions of people that have died from heart disease. And it's a lot to do with the information that came out that wasn't maybe necessarily accurate in the way that we see it now, but it was based in profit. And the timing was very well timed. And so that, you know, there's a lot of, at one point we thought cancer was caused by meat. And we're finding that's probably actually not true, because how could that be true if it's just the meat, just the one ingredient? We've lived off of that for our entire existence, right? That's like saying it's stuff like that people in that community, the meat-based or the carnivore community, are challenging at this point. And why I think I'm so fascinated by all of this, because it's not just about health. It really has a lot to do with external factors, politics, money, marketing, capitalism, and all of those things aren't inherently bad either. I'm a fan. It's not that I'm saying those are bad. It's rather that we're human beings and people want to succeed and get to the top.
Yeah.
But why, by what means, right? And what's the reality of how real food is created, and how, you know, processed food, fake food is created. And is that food? Is it not food? You know, what my question is, like, you know, you can look at the FDA and it's like, okay, we recommend you have one serving of this, you know, product, and that's going to be a good enough amount. But it's directly contradicting or conflicting with the food scientists designing the food to make it very hard to stop at one serving.
Yeah.
And it relies on the individual to A, be aware of that, and then B, be able to overcome that. And like you and I, we can't have an Oreo. It doesn't work because you have 25 of them.
Exactly.
You know?
Yeah.
So that's the part that's interesting, because sure, maybe the FDA is saying, yep, this is good, this is safe for one serving, but it conflicts with the profits that come from an addictive food. Yeah. That's how I see it.
Yeah.
And, you know.
Yeah, it's very difficult to navigate these things. But, you know, again, I think it's extremely important that we remain curious, right? That we keep investigating and we do not allow ourselves to become evangelists, right? You know, you have to believe me. Look at what I discovered. This is the ultimate truth. No, we don't know enough.
Okay, well, I am so appreciative of your time, and you have a very interesting career. Do you have anywhere that people can find you or your work?
I don't know.
That's okay. If not,
we have a website. Like, it's from the 80s.
I'll put the website below.